I think we're moving too fast. And I think in part that's due to technology, because technology is moving faster and faster in terms of its pace and speed, and also in terms of its development and its advancement. And because technology plays such a critical part in our lives, it's embedded in every single thing that we do, technology is both dragging us forward and we're also racing to keep up with it. I think that we're living in a culture of speed in which our lives are hurried and fast-paced because we've adopted the predominant value of faster. And sadly, when we go faster and faster, we're more likely to miss things. And the faster we go, the more things that we're likely to miss, and we're going to probably miss some really important things. But for too many of us, we consider that part of the sacrifices that we need to make in order to gain technology's promise of a better life. But I think if we were honest with ourselves, we would conclude that we're not really sacrificing. What we're really doing is neglecting. We're neglecting things that we shouldn't be neglecting. We're neglecting relationships. We just don't get enough of the people who love us, and we don't get enough of them. We're neglecting the activities that we once participated in that gave our lives balance and meaning. We're neglecting our environment, our planet, the only home that we know of right now. And we're neglecting ourselves. The dilemma, of course, is this, that when you neglect these types of things, you suffer. Yet despite the fact that suffering is in the cards and it's a prospect, we continue to race forward faster and faster and faster. But you know what actually got us to slow down and stop? It took a worldwide pandemic to get us to stay at home. It took a worldwide pandemic to get us to slow down and to be still and to be present. It took a worldwide pandemic to get us to learn some really important lessons about life. One of them is that when we actually slow down and when we carve out time to be still, that we can be in the present moment. And it is in that present moment and in that stillness that we can actually find the life that we've always wanted to have. And for those of us who have learned this lesson, are slowing down and are accessing stillness and are being in the present moment, we're catching up with the past. Stillness has always been an important part of our lives. Stillness has informed our beliefs, which inform our values, by which we live our lives. That is, up until about the present day, where we've adopted a different value set. But if you look back through history, our spiritual traditions, our wisdom traditions, our philosophies, you almost always find stillness embedded there. Going back thousands of years, looking at our yoga traditions, you find that stillness is a critical part of yoga tradition, practice, and teaching. That's why at the end of your yoga sessions, you sit in shavasana or corpse pose, where you still your body. In the 2nd century, noted Stoic and Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote about stillness in his writing, Meditations, in which he extolled the virtues of being in stillness. In the 3rd century, Chinese philosopher and Taoist Lao Tzu wrote Cultivating Stillness. Concurrently, we saw in China the development of the Chanding practice, which is a meditative practice where the body is completely stilled and the focus is on our physical experience. Through the 4th through the 7th century, we saw the development of the Vedanta, one of the 6 Hindu schools of wisdom and philosophy, central to which is stillness. You see, what we find throughout history, our philosophical approaches, our wisdom traditions and religious practices, is that stillness is embedded throughout them all, which asks and raises 2 questions. Why does stillness actually matter? And what actually happens when we're in stillness? And these are 2 great questions that we need to answer. And Lao Tzu, our 3rd century Chinese Taoist philosopher, provides us with the answer. And what he says is this: it is in stillness that we experience internal alchemy. Alchemy, where you take one substance and you turn it into a different one, where lead turns into gold. If we updated the language, we would simply say that we are experiencing biohacking or hacking our biology. It is through stillness that we actually are upgrading our lived experience. We're upgrading our physiology. We're upgrading our mental abilities. We're upgrading our spiritual connections. And all of this actually makes perfect sense when you understand what happens to us when we are actually in stillness. So let's look at 4 examples. What happens to us emotionally, what happens to us physically, what happens to us spiritually, and what happens to us mentally when we get still, when our body is in stillness. So emotionally, we're able to regulate our emotional state through stillness. When you're feeling strong emotions, anxiety, fear, worry, stress, anger, it doesn't matter. We're able to calm ourselves and regulate our emotions when we still our bodies, because in doing so, we can focus on our breath. Slowing our breath down impacts our parasympathetic and our sympathetic nervous systems, which are linked to our limbic system, which originates all of our emotions. So we're able to calm the limbic system down simply by being still, and we regulate our emotional state. And this aligns nicely with what Marcus Aurelius suggested, which Stoics see stillness as a way of developing internal and emotional equanimity. From a physiological standpoint, we can manage and upgrade our physiological experience through stillness. Do you know that if you average 4 hours of sleep per night, you compromise your immune system, you become vulnerable to viruses, susceptible to sickness, you don't recover like you should, and the end game could come faster than you want it to. But when we practice stillness, specifically the stillness of sleep, and you get between 7.5 to 8 hours worth of that, you activate to the highest degree our body's regenerative and restorative powers, which help you heal, which help you have health, so you can live a long life. And this is specifically what is said in Chanding practice, that practicing stillness in Chanding leads to health, healing, and longevity. We upgrade our ability to think by promoting greater brain health through the practice of stillness. During the day as we're walking and thinking, a lot of waste product gets built up in our brains. This slows it down, compromises our ability to think with clarity, and impacts our mental health. But only at night, when you're in the stillness of sleep, do all of those waste products get cleared away. So you wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, clear-headed, able to think, able to make it through your day. But it is only through the stillness of sleep does that happen. So stillness gives us the ability to keep our brains not just squeaky clean, but functioning at their highest level. And from a spiritual perspective, if you look at so many of our spiritual and our religious traditions, it is through stillness that we have the opportunity to enter into the presence of the divine, to worship, to access God, to get to know God. And in some of our traditions, we get to know ourselves through stillness. So in all of these ways, we see that stillness is a way of making ourselves better. And perhaps that's because the maximum benefit of the things that make us better are only fully available to us when we're in a state of stillness. And I've always wondered, could it be that stillness is the mechanism that activates the forces and factors that make us better, bringing them together in a really coherent and specific way that not just makes us better, but is also the key to imagination, intelligence, creativity, revelation, and more? Albert Einstein would say yes, because Einstein regularly put himself in a place of stillness. He would self-hypnotize himself and enter these still trance-like states. And in those states, he would seek answers, he would exercise his imagination, he would try and find solutions. And it is said that it's in one of those states that he came up with the idea that led to his theory of relativity. Well, it's not just Einstein. It's Tesla, it's Edison, and a countless host of others who in some way or another practice stillness in their lives to upgrade their intelligence, to upgrade their imagination, to upgrade their ability to solve problems. I see stillness as a superpower that's available to us all if we avail ourselves of it. So what does this practice of stillness actually look like? Well, here's how I practice it. I practice stillness by sitting. And I sit and I take my hands and I place them on the top of my thighs. And in that position, what I want to focus on is my felt experience. So what I'm doing is I'm closing my eyes to shut out all of that visual input because I don't want to be distracted by it. And once I'm sitting in that place of stillness, I focus on tuning into what I'm feeling and opening up to my body's felt experience. That is what I'm sensing, what I'm feeling, and the emotions that actually arise. And one thing I don't do is I don't label, name, or identify what's going on in the experience. Because as soon as I do that, I have limited what is possible for that experience. And by not naming, not identifying, not quantifying what I'm sensing, feeling, or emoting, I'm now open to all of the possible possibilities that that experience can bring me. And that's what I want to have happen. So as I'm relaxing into that state of stillness, I'm doing three things. I'm releasing my hold over my emotions. I'm accepting what it is I'm feeling. And I'm surrendering to what my body is sensing. And an interesting thing happens when we do that. When we release the hold of the emotions that we try and hold back in our lives, when we accept what we're feeling instead of questioning it and wondering about it, when we surrender to that which we are sensing, we get a chance to meet ourselves, the real us, not the one that we hold back, not the one that we repress, not the one that we don't want to deal with. We get to meet us. And interestingly, that's what it says in yoga practice in the Vedanta. Through stillness, you get to meet your truest self. But there are a lot of benefits to meeting your truest self. And one of those benefits is you get to know who you are. And when you get to know who you are, you have the opportunity to make better choices, better decisions that align with who you actually are, not the person who you've been holding down, repressing, and trying to keep at bay. And because you had that opportunity, you now can live an authentic life. A life in accordance to who you are. A life that's best for you. Not the life or lifestyle that potentially is being prescribed for us, that we all see and envy and want, that's broadcast through social media and other technological channels. We get a chance to have our lives, the ones that line up with our truest selves. This is a remarkable opportunity today, especially when we think about the amount of time we spend in social media looking at our phones, especially when you consider the amount of time that we spend having that information pumped into our brains and influencing us. Isn't it time that we got back to who we are and started living our lives according to our honest, authentic self? Well, that's, I believe, the promise of stillness, which is why I think we should be practicing it. I have a saying, in the stillness with yourself, you'll find the answers. In the stillness with yourself, you'll find the way. In the stillness with yourself, you'll find you. Thank you.